Liánchéng is a heartrending love story from the book Strange Stories from a Chinese studio, also known as Liaozhai Zhiyi. It transcends the typical conventions of superficial beauty and social status, moving beyond fleeting infatuations and desires. This tale embodies a love that surpasses even life and death, a pure love untainted by lust, much like the name of the female protagonist, symbolizing the value of being continuous and unbreakable. In Jining County, there was a scholar named Qiao, who was gifted from a young age. However, despite reaching his 20s, he remained impoverished. Qiao was known for his integrity and had a good friend named Gu, who had passed away early. Qiao often helped Gu's wife and children. The county magistrate admired Qiao's literary skills and held him in high regard due to his writings. Later, when the magistrate passed away during his term and his family was stranded in Jining, unable to return home, Qiao sold his own belongings, purchased a coffin, and traveled over 2,000 miles to bring the magistrate's body and his family back to their hometown. This act earned Qiao even more respect among the literati, but it further deepened his poverty. At that time, there was a scholar named Shi who had a daughter named Liánchéng. She excelled in embroidery and was well versed in literature and etiquette. She cherished her deeply. Once, she presented a piece of embroidery titled Fatigued Embroidery made by his daughter, and invited young scholars to compose poems based on it. This was a way to select a talented son-in-law. Qiao also wrote a poem saying, "Lethargic hairpins in a lofty bun's grace, embroidering a blue lotus early in a fragrant window's space, piercing the mandarin duck's soles, so near to parting breaths, concealing threaded glances as both eyes furrow beneath." He also wrote a poem praising the exquisite embroidery. Threadwork picks up life. Like sketches, flowers and birds in the frame seem divinely matched. Weaving was never a long-lived skill, yet luckily you've grasped the essence, returning words with enlightenment. Liánchéng was greatly pleased upon reading these two poems, and she praised Qiao's talent to her father. However, her father deemed Qiao too impoverished to be a suitable match. Nevertheless, Liánchéng continued to praise Qiao to everyone she met. She even sent an old maid to give Qiao some money in her father's name, intended for his studies. Qiao sighed and said, "Liánchéng is truly my soulmate." His feelings for her grew deep, hungering and thirsting for her presence. Soon after, Liánchéng was betrothed to the son of a salt merchant named Wang Huaqing. Qiao's despair deepened. However, he continued to dream about her, thinking of her constantly. Not long after, Liánchéng fell seriously ill and was bedridden. A monk from the western regions claimed to have a remedy for her illness, but it required a piece of flesh from a man's chest to be ground into medicine. She informed Wang Huaqing of this requirement. Wang Huaqing laughed and said, "Do they want me to cut out my heart?" He dismissed the messenger. She then proclaimed that he would give his daughter's hand in marriage to whoever was willing to provide the required flesh. Upon hearing this, Qiao rushed to Shi's home, took out a knife, and sliced off a piece of flesh from his chest. His blood stained his clothes, and the monk quickly applied medicine to the wound to stop the bleeding. The monk used Qiao's flesh to make 3 pills of medicine, which Liánchéng took over 3 days, leading to her recovery. She intended to fulfill his promise and marry Liánchéng to Qiao. He informed Wang Huaqing, who became furious and threatened legal action. In fear, she hosted a feast inviting Qiao, and placed 1,000 taels of silver on the table, saying, "As a token of my gratitude for your tremendous kindness, please accept this silver." He then explained the reasons for the broken engagement. Qiao angrily retorted, "The reason I was willing to give up my flesh was to repay a friend's kindness. Am I selling my flesh?" With that, he left in a huff. Upon hearing of this, Liánchéng was deeply moved and sent the old maid to console him. She conveyed, "With your talents, you won't remain in obscurity for long. Why worry that there are no beauties in the world? I've had unsettling dreams lately. Within 3 years, I'll surely die. There's no need for others to fight over me, a ghost beneath the springs." Qiao confided in the old maid. The ancients said, "A scholar would die for a true friend." My gratitude to her isn't about her beauty. I'm genuinely concerned that Liánchéng might not truly understand my heart. If she does, What harm is there in not becoming a couple? The old maid spoke on Liánchéng's behalf, explaining her true feelings. Qiao concluded, if that's the case, if she smiles at me when we meet, I will die without regrets. Not long after the old maid's visit, Qiao coincidentally encountered Liánchéng as she returned from her uncle's home. Their eyes met, and she smiled at him affectionately. Qiao was overjoyed, exclaiming, Liánchéng truly understands my heart. Before long, Wang Huaqing's family visited the Shi household to discuss the wedding date. Learning of this, Liánchéng fell ill again and passed away after a few months. Qiao went to offer his condolences and wept bitterly. Overcome by grief, he too passed away. The Shi family carried him back to his home. Qiao knew he had already died, but he didn't feel any sadness. He left the village and still hoped to see Liánchéng again. In the distance, he saw a major road running north and south, crowded with people like ants. He joined the crowd and walked along the road. Eventually, he entered a Yamen government office and coincidentally met his old friend Gu Sheng. Gu Sheng was surprised to see him, and asked, how did you come here? He took Qiao's hand and wanted to lead him away. Qiao let out a deep sigh, and said, my worries have already gone. Gu Sheng replied, I am in charge of the archives here, and have the trust of my superiors. If there's anything I can do to help, I will certainly do my best. Qiao then inquired about Liánchéng's whereabouts. Gu Sheng led him to various places until they finally found Liánchéng sitting with a girl in white clothes, both shedding tears in a corner of a corridor. Liánchéng, upon seeing Qiao, quickly stood up, as if overjoyed, and asked him how he had arrived. Qiao said, if you are dead, how could I dare to be alive in this world? Liánchéng cried and said, I'm so ungrateful, yet you don't despise me. Why sacrifice yourself in death for me? In this life, I cannot be with you anymore, but in the next life, I will definitely marry you. Qiao turned to Gu Sheng and said, you have things to attend to, so go ahead. I find death very joyful. I don't want to live anymore. I only ask you to inquire where Liánchéng has been reincarnated. I want to be with her. Gu Sheng agreed and left. At this moment, the girl in white asked Liánchéng who Qiao was. Liánchéng then recounted their history to her. The girl listened and couldn't contain her sorrow. Liánchéng told Qiao, this girl has the same surname as me and is called Binyang. She is the daughter of the governor of Changsha. We've been together all this time and have grown close. Qiao took a closer look at Binyang and found her melancholic and sorrowful appearance deeply endearing. He was about to ask more questions when Gu Sheng returned and congratulated Qiao, saying, I've sorted things out for you. Let the young lady accompany you to return to the world of the living, all right? Both of them were pleased with the news. As they were about to bid farewell to Gu Sheng, Binyang burst into tears and pleaded, if sister leaves, where should I go? Please have mercy on me and save me. I'm even willing to serve as your servant. Liánchéng felt distressed but couldn't think of a solution. She discussed with Qiao, who then beseeched Gu Sheng for help. Gu Sheng was reluctant and insisted it couldn't be done. Qiao persisted, and Gu Sheng reluctantly said, let me try my best. After a meal's time, he returned and shook his head, saying, how about this? I'm truly powerless. Binyang heard this and cried sorrowfully, clinging to Liánchéng's arm as if she were reluctant to let her go. She was afraid that Liánchéng would leave immediately. The three of them fell into silence, with no solution in sight. Seeing Binyang's mournful and anguished appearance, it truly tugged at their hearts. Suddenly, Gu Sheng stood up and declared, you both take Binyang with you. I feel guilty, and I'm willing to take on this responsibility. Even if it costs me my life. Binyang finally felt happy and followed Qiao outside. However, Qiao was concerned that she would be alone on the long journey to Changsha and without a companion. Binyang said, I want to go with you. I don't want to go back. Qiao replied, you are being foolish. If you don't return, how can you be resurrected? Once we reach Hunan, it will be an honor if you don't avoid us. Fortunately, there were two elderly women holding contracts to recruit people for work in Changsha. Qiao entrusted Binyang to them and then bid a tearful farewell. On the way, Liánchéng could hardly walk. She had to rest. After walking a little over a mile, they stopped more than 10 times before they saw the entrance gate of their village. Liánchéng said, after returning to the living, our situation might become complicated again. Please go to my home first, retrieve my body, and then I can be reborn in your family. My father probably won't change his mind again. Qiao agreed, thinking it was a good plan. So, they first went to Qiao's house. Liánchéng trembled as if she couldn't walk any further, so Qiao stopped and waited for her. She said, I've reached this point, and I'm trembling all over, my mind is scattered. I'm really worried that our wish won't come true. We need to discuss it carefully. Otherwise, when we're alive again, we might be helpless once more, supporting each other. They entered a room and remained there in silence for a long time. Suddenly, Liánchéng smiled and asked, Do you find me repulsive? Qiao was surprised and asked what she meant. Liánchéng shyly said, I'm afraid our plan might fail. I don't want to disappoint you. Let me repay you first as a spirit. Qiao was overjoyed, and they expressed their love for each other passionately. However, due to not daring to rush their rebirth, they hesitated and stayed in the room for 3 days. Liánchéng urged Qiao to hurry and return to the world of the living. When Qiao arrived at the ancestral hall, he suddenly woke up. His family was amazed and gave him some soup. Qiao sent someone to summon Shi, requesting Liánchéng's body, and claimed he could resurrect her. She was ecstatic and agreed to his request. As soon as Liánchéng's body was brought into Qiao's house, they saw that Liánchéng had indeed come back to life. Liánchéng told her father, I've already given myself to Qiao. There's no reason for me to return. If you don't agree, I will die again. After returning home, she sent servants to Qiao's house to serve his daughter. When Wang Huaqing heard about this, he immediately filed a complaint with the authorities. The officials, having received bribes from Wang's family, sided with them and once again awarded Liánchéng to Wang Huaqing. Qiao was resentful and angry, and he wished to die, but ultimately he was helpless. When Liánchéng arrived at Wang's house, she refused to eat and only sought a quick death. Finding the house empty, she tied a cord to the rafters to hang herself, but someone intervened and saved her. The next day, her condition worsened, and it seemed she was about to die. Wang Huaqing was frightened and sent her back to her parents' home. She had her brought to Qiao's house again. Wang Huaqing learned of this, but had no choice but to relent. After Liánchéng recovered from her illness, she often thought of Binying. She wanted to send someone with a letter to visit her or have her visit, but the journey was long and challenging. One day, a family member suddenly came in and reported, there are many carriages and horses outside the gate. Qiao and his wife went out and saw Binying in the courtyard. The three of them met with mixed emotions of sadness and joy. The governor himself had brought his daughter. Qiao invited him into the house, and the governor said, My daughter owes her rebirth to you. She has sworn not to marry anyone else. I now follow her wishes. Qiao expressed his gratitude by kowtowing and thanking him. She also arrived and had a conversation with the governor. Qiao's full name was Qiao Minyan, with the courtesy name Di Nian. As noted by Yi Shishi, the profound mutual understanding between Liánchéng and Qiao led to their mutual commitment. While some might label them as fools, remember that even Tianheng's 500 strong men were not necessarily fools. This is because the rarity and preciousness of recognition lead virtuous people and heroes to feel grateful and indebted beyond control.